Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. It's January 6th, 2025. 4 years ago today, our nation's capital, our democracy, withstood a violent assault. The rioters who tried to tear it all down did so because they were told that an election was stolen. The footage you're about to see is from the film Fight Like Hell, which you can watch now for free on this network. Even as we are about to inaugurate the man who inspired this attack, we cannot consign to history what happened that day, because it affects everything about the politics of today and what we are about to endure in a second Trump term. Don't ever forget this day 4 years ago.
Let's go! Let's go!
Even though we've all seen the headlines, the pictures, and the videos, and it's hard to escape the images of violent mobs storming the Capitol, a significant chunk of the American population is remembering that day in a very different light. In fact, it's almost as if the events of January 6th have been rebranded, rewritten as something that wasn't so bad, a mostly peaceful protest that just got out of hand. I want to talk about how that shift has happened. In some cases, the narrative surrounding January 6th has been twisted so much that it's unrecognizable. Tucker Carlson aired selective security footage from the Capitol riot, which he framed as a peaceful gathering. Others have suggested that left-wing activists or even the FBI might have been behind the violence. These conspiracy theories have gained enough traction that polls show a significant number of Americans, especially Republicans, now believe the FBI might have orchestrated the whole thing, even though these theories have been thoroughly debunked. On January 6th, mobs of rioters breached the Capitol, violently clashed with police, and tried to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's victory. 4 people died, over 140 police officers were injured, and the chaos was broadcast worldwide. Despite all of that, a lot of people, especially within the Republican Party, are now saying it wasn't that bad. A poll from the Washington Post and the University of Maryland found that about 7 in 10 Republicans think it's time to stop talking about January 6th. They're just over it. We have entered a dangerous era of collective amnesia. But here's the thing. The Capitol riot wasn't just a one-day event. It was part of a much broader plan, an effort that spanned months, all based on the lie that the election was stolen. On the night of the 2020 election, Trump immediately claimed that the election was, quote, rigged, and that it was stolen from him. And this narrative was amplified on social media and right-wing news coverage for months leading up to January 6th. This is how that disinformation spread.
The overall story is vote-by-mail ballots that have now been processed and reported out in Pennsylvania. Biden is winning overall. He's winning 76% of them.
Democrats and the mainstream media expect us to believe that Joe Biden made a miracle comeback. This is one of the biggest hoaxes of all time. This is the biggest hoax since the COVID pandemic.
According to this new statement from the Trump campaign, they are suing to stop the counting of those ballots.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
After 4 long, tense days, we've reached a historic moment in this election.
Former Vice President Joe Biden will become the 46th President of the United States.
One day since Joe Biden was declared the president-elect of America, President Trump was still not conceding. He continues to make claims of voter fraud.
Hundreds and hundreds of affidavits that have been signed by people under the penalty of perjury that they saw and witnessed voter fraud.
There was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times.
Dead people tend to vote more often when you make it easier for them to vote.
Welcome back. I'm back with Sidney Powell, who is part of President Trump's legal team in contesting this election. Sidney, we talked about the Dominion software.
That is where the fraud took place, where they were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist.
Right after the election, Trump's legal team, headed by Rudy Giuliani, went on a full-court press to overturn the results, initiating over 60 lawsuits. Trump called state officials in Georgia, asking them if they could find enough votes to flip the state in his favor. At the same time, another plan was unfolding, the fake elector strategy. In 7 states won by Joe Biden, a group of Republican operatives submitted false documents claiming to be electors for Trump. The idea here was to create a parallel, fabricated slate of electors so that on January 6th, when Congress met to formally certify Biden's victory, there would be a reason to reject legitimate votes or at least delay the certification. And that's where the pressure on Vice President Mike Pence comes in. As we know, Pence had the ceremonial duty of overseeing the certification process. But Trump wanted him to reject Biden's electors, to throw out legitimate votes, and to use his position to block the outcome. Pence refused to do so. On December 19th, Trump sent out his infamous tweet about coming to D.C. on January 6th, saying, "It will be wild." And even though most of the 100,000-plus people that attended that day were peaceful, what happened was a violent attack. Many right-wing news sites cherry-picked images of protesters walking peacefully through the halls of Congress as an attempt to distract from what actually happened. But the reality is the riot was only one piece of a much larger, deeply coordinated effort to subvert the democratic process. The riot was meant to delay the certification, create chaos, and intimidate lawmakers. And that's why it's so important to focus not just on the event itself, but on the broader plot, on the months of effort leading up to it, the lies, the legal wrangling, and the attempts to manipulate the system. This wasn't some spontaneous outburst. It was a premeditated attempt to overturn a legitimate election.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here to let you know that we'd love to hear from you. Your comments, suggestions, thoughts about future topics and guests. Email us at info@thekenharbaughshow.com and make sure to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and back to the show.
Again, here's a clip from Fight Like Hell that drives this point home, not with after-the-fact interviews and talking heads, but with a first-hand journalistic account of what happened on January 6th and in the days leading up to it.
This is not an election between Republicans and Democrats. This is an epic struggle for the future of this country between dark and light. We will win this fight, or America will step off into 1,000 years of darkness.
We're going to protect this president by stopping the steal. Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
When I went to bed on election night, he was ahead.
The system is a lie. The ballot counting's a lie.
It's called democracy. You count every single vote.
We did not have a free, fair, and transparent vote.
Joe Biden will be removed one way or another.
We are at war.
Spiritual war for the soul of this country.
Yeah!
The situation we're in is a situation of treason. The punishment for treason
is death.
The president watches these rallies, and he's watching you today.
Warning you guys now.
You can't stop what's coming tomorrow.
What makes America great?
The United States Constitution is different from every other country in the world.
Are you willing to do what it takes? Will you fight for America?
This election was stolen. The president is willing to stake his reputation that we're going to find criminality there.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. We must stop the steal, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The attempts to overturn the 2020 election were unsuccessful, but so many of the people involved in the violence of that day, some 1,400 individuals have been charged, are now held up as martyrs by Trump and his allies. And Trump has promised to pardon many of them as soon as he is back in office. We've seen how this works, how easily people can be convinced that January 6th was just another partisan squabble. That happened because of misinformation and the fractured media ecosystem, both of which continue to twist American politics and undermine democracy. But at MeidasTouch, we're here to tell the truth. The attempts to overturn the election on January 6th may have failed in the moment, but the threats to democracy loom larger than ever, and the echoes of that day reverberate still. If we do not acknowledge the full scope of what happened, not just on the day, but in the lead-up, we risk repeating it. Our experience since January 6th, 2021, is a warning that history is not just something that happens. It's something that can be rewritten. We need to make sure we remember it correctly.